Another Sales Wisdom podcast today with Kevin Hopp, should I say. He's the call guy on LinkedIn. Not sure if you heard about him, but we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics, SDRing. We're going to talk about cold calling, warm calls, everything in between. Kev is, really prominent on LinkedIn, bunch of connections, and he's also a podcaster. So going to get into that too. Kev, can you introduce yourself? Tell us a bit more about the call guys.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Charles. Really appreciate you bringing me on the pod here. Like you mentioned, I have a podcast of my own. I've done about 100 podcasts, a mixture of my own and then other folks. So I've really enjoyed this medium as a way to kind of get the story out there, build the brand a bit. So I'm the co-founder of a business called The Call Guys. Me and my partner, Ronan Pissar. We're actually both located in San Diego, California, which is really nice. We've been working in person together for a little bit here, which is the first time I've worked in an office with somebody in about 4 or 5 years, and it's been pretty fun. What we do outbound sales, strategy, consulting, and training, right? So we really help B2B software businesses think about how they're going to build an outbound process internally, or if they already have a team, which most of the market has a team, has a function, has people on staff that are tasked to get new business. We can do training as well. So we do consulting and training. That's what we do. My background is in all B2B tech startups. I've been an SDR, I've been a salesperson, senior salesperson, went into consulting a few years ago. Ever since then, worked with about 50 different SaaS businesses consulting on their outbound strategy and process. So that's me.
Love it. Pretty exciting. We said, yes, B2B tech founders, some of them CEOs, maybe VP sales also in there. So it's pretty much fair to say that you teach nerds to make calls. I'm a nerd myself. How hard is that to typically get someone that's so technical and sometimes introverted to actually pick up the phone call and probably do something that is in their top 10 of most feared action item?
Yeah, that's a great question. If you're talking about teaching founders to cold call, I've done a little bit of that. That's really challenging. That is really challenging. And it's hard for a first sales hire as well, because there's kind of a magic to the SDR world. And that magic is you don't know everything. If you know everything, it gets really, really hard. Now, what I mean by everything is everything there is to know about the market, the product, how it implements, how it relates to everything. Like a founder has all of that in their brain, and they live and feel this motion, right? And then to try and dumb it down, for lack of a better term, and distill it all the way down to here's what you should say on the phone is really challenging, to your point. And folks tend to avoid it because they don't know what to say, and they have everything to say. What Ronan and I do is we put a framework around this. We don't just randomly pop into calls and pop into client engagement saying, oh, let's think about what we can tell you this time. No, we have a whole process and strategy called conversation first prospecting. So conversation first prospecting is the concept and the methodology that is all based around, if you want to know if someone in your market, in your total addressable market, if they have a problem, if they have something that you can help them with, if you want to know, the first thing you should do is try to call them and have that conversation, right? And there's 3 pieces to it. It's people, it's process, and then it's technology. It's 2023, right? One of the other things we say is cold calling's not dead. You're doing it wrong, right? So if you look at a lot of our customers, our clients, they're sales leaders and founders that understand that phone is a way to get it done, but the way they might have done it in the past, or the way they were taught 15, 10, 20 years ago, doesn't work anymore. So, Ronan and I are both millennials, and we take this millennial approach of blending people, process, and technology together in a way to go outbound.
Right. And for it to sound like a conversation, the opener is so important, because it's like, the book cover. And if you start from the wrong foot, hi, my name is Charles, how are you today? You will like straight up open the page of the book that says, okay, that's another guy calling me a salesperson trying to get something out of me. So What is the proper intro there, and to make it feel like a conversation rather than a typical sales call?
It's a great question. I think typical sales calls might start with the how you doing today, but it's what comes next, right? What comes next is what separates winning calls from the masses. The 98% of calls are not successful in anything. I'm a fan of opening with, "Hey, this is Kevin with the call guys. How you doing today?" Now, why do I do that? Because for half a second, the other person on the other end of the line goes like this. I'm all right. And what's going on in their head, the metaphor is a pinball. Pinball is going around the pinball machine. It's saying, okay, I know Kevin. He sounds friendly. When someone sounds friendly, your brain thinks, oh, do I know him? Do I? The call guys, what's that? I know what calls are, I know what guys are, but the call guys, I don't know what that's all going on in their head, right? And I know that. So because I know what's going on in their head, I know what's coming back. What comes back 99 times out of 100? Yeah, I'm all right. Who is this again? Where are you saying you're calling from? Boom. Now I got you leaning forward and you're saying, oh, who's this? And you say back, yeah, it's Kevin with the call guys. I know I'm an interruption, caught you out of the blue here. Do you have a minute to have a back and forth conversation, or are you heads down doing something else, super busy? If they're truly busy, like, juggling the kids, got coffee in my hand, got this and that, they'll be like, yeah, I don't have time to chat. Because what you're really asking for is you're trying to ask for a conversation, not assuming the conversation, right? I think bad sales calls assume the conversation. They assume that because you open you answer the phone, that you're ready to talk, and you start doing your pitch. You just go right into your pitch, and then you get stopped, and they go, whoa, 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 hey, take me off your list. Hey, I'm not interested. Did I ask for this call? I'm on the do not call list. Right? It's the same principle as someone adding you on LinkedIn. I'd like to add you to my professional network. And then the first thing that happens after you click accept is, Kevin, do you need web development? Are you looking to hire a Java developer? It's the same thing. People do it on the phone. That's a bad sales pitch, right? A good pitch starts off with the first thing we do is we sell the conversation. Say, hey, look, caught you out of the blue. You don't know me. You don't know me. Do you have a minute to talk? Can you talk? And if we get that, once they say they can talk, that's when we can pitch. And it's not really a pitch, it's more of an explanation. You're explaining to them why you called. And the reason that you called is not to sell them something, it's to have a back and forth dialogue about a potential business problem they have and provide a valuable solution. And guess what? Might be they don't have the business problem. They're not in the market for valuable solutions. We're going to learn about that, and we can always follow up.
Love it. Yeah, you have a couple of things that also helps you. Well, you sound cool, and the call guy sounds really familiar. So I guess that helps. Two questions here. First, sometimes I get annoyed when people send me on LinkedIn like, hey Charles, what's up? How are you? And then, can I send you this? And they don't get to the point. How can we avoid that on LinkedIn is my first question. And then the second question is related to the first comment I made about you. You have no accent, you sound cool, you sound relaxed. What about people that have accents and sound really stressed when they hit up their first phone calls?
Yeah. Well, the easiest thing to talk about there is the accent thing, right? And believe it or not, Ronan and I do a public facing boot camp where we teach anyone and everyone that wants to cold call, wants to sign up and pay, can learn how to cold call. And about half the folks that go through the boot camp are foreign, right? And they have to call, and they are from a different country, and they're going to have an accent one way or another. In America, there is a bit of a bias around that. And I think the first thing to do is to understand that, right? It's not your fault that, that you're calling and you have an accent. And it's not the other person's fault that they're going to automatically assume that you're a spammer either. It's just like it's like the nature of what's going on. But if we understand that there's like already a little bit of a barrier there, then we can work on it and overcome that, right? So if we understand the accent's going to be a barrier, we have to try and use, you know, colloquial terms, colloquialisms, right? What does that mean? I mean, like, you have to try and speak like your buyer. You have to speak like your prospect. I think one of the mistakes that folks from other countries make when they're cold calling in America is they use very like hyper correct English, and they're it looks like it sounds like they're reading off a script, because they probably are. You got to have a conversational nature to it, right? To, like you said, my voice sounds friendly, my voice sounds put together. That's because I've been speaking English for 30 years. I know it's an advantage, but you got to practice and practice and practice and practice. And you mentioned something important there. You said stressful, or anxious or whatever, how they feel when they get on the phone. The only way to deal with call reluctance is to call a lot, right? It's like the dentist is like, hey, the only way to avoid cavities is you got to brush your teeth. You're like, oh, I don't like brushing my teeth, but I also hate cavities. You got to brush your teeth. You got to make the calls. The more you call and the more conversations you have, the better you're going to get, because your brain needs to rewire to having the cold conversation. It's not like a normal conversation, right? I think that's a common misconception. People think that sales is just asking, hey, do you want to buy? And it's not, there needs to be more to it.
It's about
So,
trust. Yeah, it's about linking up
yeah.
with the other person. We could even like go woo woo and say energy. It's all about your energy. Are we an
Yeah.
energy fit? Do you like that vibe or not? Do you feel dishonesty in that person? Do you feel they're hiding something? Do you feel they're being disingenuous? And if so, yeah, until the connection is being made, they'll never buy anything from you. So good advice there. Um, and yeah, the first leads that you will call, I used to call them burners, right? Because unfortunately they're like used as training, and that's the part that I like the most about calling. It's the data that you get. So not only do you improve yourself with time, but you get very, very valuable data. And just that, if anything, apart from the leads, getting data is really much more obtainable than via a cold email. It's much more human. So yeah, still lots of
Yeah.
value there.
I used
And
to I talk about this all the time, by the way. Like, you make a really good point there. What do you like, the question that I ask people, what do you learn when someone doesn't reply to a cold email?
nada.
You can't, like, you can make an assumption, right? You can assume, well, they didn't reply, they're not interested. No, they didn't tell you they're not interested. They simply didn't reply. They could
Ghosted.
have written an entire reply saying that they love your stuff and want to buy, and they forgot to hit send. It could be sitting in their drafts. So with cold calls, I call that exhaust data. Exhaust data is what you get aside from meetings. You're going to
Yep,
get some
side effects.
meetings. You're going to get warm follow-ups. But the exhaust data of learning who just bought a solution just like yours, is it a 3-year agreement? Okay, I'm not going to call you for a while. Who just changed jobs? Who just got told their company, all hands, not public information, that they're getting acquired? Oh, wow. Changes entire strategies around how you go about prospecting.
Right. I've got like 4 more questions left for you because yeah, your LinkedIn profile is really much insightful. What value did you get out of peer groups slash mastermind groups like Modern Sales Pros and Revenue Collective is the first one I have.
Yeah, I have gotten a tremendous amount of value out of being in a place where everyone's talking about the same thing. And it seems simple, but LinkedIn is not that, right? LinkedIn is an echo chamber, and it's driven by an algorithm. Modern Sales Pros and Revenue Collective, for example, those two, or it's called Pavilion now, right? Um, those are just places where people that do what I do talk about what we do. They talk about sales. So you get to not only hear like best practices, tips, and tricks, but you can keep a really good pulse on an entire industry, the tech sales industry, by paying attention to what's going on in these groups. It takes a little bit of time, right? This is something that I do in the morning when I'm drinking my morning coffee, between meetings, when I need to recharge. Instead of looking at Instagram on my phone, I'll pull up in my Modern Sales Pros inbox and see what questions people are asking. And the other piece of this is you can build a bit of a brand by interacting inside of these communities. So at its most basic level, a good way to develop your career is to be around other people that do what you do. And that's what these groups allow you to do.
Right. And then I see the podcasting. What pushed you to start your own podcast, and how does one make a great podcast? Is it the questions you ask? Is it the platforms you use? Give us your best tips there.
Well, I've had a podcast for a little over a year now. The first 6 months of my podcast, it was a storytelling podcast. It was actually called the Sales Career Podcast. And I used it kind of selfishly as a way to meet cool people and to hear sellers' stories. And I'd approach somebody who had an incredible story that I thought was incredible and say, hey, you want to come on my podcast and talk about your career? And like 99 times out of 100, they said yes. So I got to interact and meet some really incredible people. I pivoted to a live cold calling show about a little over 6 months ago, and I've been doing that ever since, and that has been incredible. So I cold call live on LinkedIn. Nowadays, it's every other week. For a while, I did it every single week, making live cold calls on LinkedIn. And the podcast is taking the best moments from that show and packaging these like incredible learning moments from real cold calls and putting them into a podcast. Now, it's very different. It's very different. A lot of gurus will talk. Everyone likes to talk. Everyone likes to say, hey, here's what I would do if I were you. Here's the top 5. I'm not trying to do that. I'm telling people, hey, I have a way that I do cold calling and it works. And it's something you can learn too. I have an online course. You can buy it. You can attend my boot camp. You can hire us to train your team. But don't take my word for it. Listen to it. Actually hear me put the rubber to the road.
Love
Make
it.
cold calls. It's ballsy, for lack of a better word, right? Like people
Yes.
won't do it. A lot of people don't do that. So
Really
it
original.
sets me apart.
And that's the way you
Yeah.
grow, you put it all underlined. You don't hide any of your cards, you just put it all out there. Do you mention the client's name, or do you protect their company names on these calls? Do you blur their voice? How do you do?
Yeah, great question. So in the live show, you can only hear one side of the audio. So you can only hear
Right.
me talking. In post-production, the podcast team will blur all PII, personal
Okay.
identifiable
Love it.
information. So
Powerful.
yeah,
Really love
yeah,
the concept. Then the call guys, you started that one 4 months ago. Why did you decided to go in a partnership with someone after being a
yeah.
founder for 5 years?
It's a great question. I've made a lot of money on my own. Hopp Consulting Group has been the only way I've made $1 in the last 5-6 years here. And I've done fairly well, but I can't help but sit there. It was last summer, about a year ago now. And I was just thinking to myself, I'm like, what am I doing in 5 years? What am I doing in 10 years? Is Hopp Consulting Group how I'm going to retire? And the thought crossed my mind for a moment, maybe I should go get a job. And then I looked around real quick and saw the tech industry about an iceberg. Things were already starting to look ugly. And CNN ran for the first time last summer, probably last June, recession imminent. And I'm like, I've been laid off a bunch. I don't need to be laid off again. So I'm like, I'm not going to do that. But I began searching for how do I build something bigger than myself. That was my goal. I went in my network. I talked to probably 30, 40 different people that I thought were really interesting. And I chose to work with Ronan. I approached him. We both have our version of the story, but I was going after him. I was approaching him. I was trying to date him. I was like, hey, man, we should get coffee. Hey, we should do this. We should do that. And I finally got him in a corner and said, why don't we start a business together? You and I are the kings of cold calling. We're the kings of outbound. We're going to multiply what we do and turn it into a real business, meaning we want employees, right? We don't just want revenue. We don't want to be solopreneurs. We want employees and to build a sustainable company. and really at the end of the day, the reason I chose to work with Ronan is, sure, he's good at cold calling, but he's an authentically really good person. And that's more important to me. I've been screwed over a few times in the last few years with businesses and partnerships that didn't work out. And it's because I valued things in the business sense more than I valued personal
Right.
sense.
Right.
Ronan is an authentically good guy. So him and I are trying to build a business together, and we're starting to have some good traction. We're really excited about it.
Plus, he has a very badass name, which is sounding like Ronin, a samurai without the master. That's like,
Exactly.
yeah, you got to choose
Yeah.
the partner with the right name too. But no, like really valuable what you're saying, and I feel we could continue this conversation because I was screwed many times over in the past, and then people say, "Oh, don't go in business with people that are kind of friends," and there's all this advice. So yeah, we could talk about
Yeah.
that for years. But yeah, we're already on time. Kev, where can people find out more about you and the call guys?
The easiest way to follow us is LinkedIn right now. We're going to be launching a newsletter and a few other things soon. So if you follow us on LinkedIn, you'll be clued into our universe. Check out the LinkedIn page, Hop on Calls, and the Call Guys, both of those LinkedIn pages. That's how you can see us cold calling live. And then our website is really simple, www.thecallguys.com. And my email is kevin@thecallguys.com. So anyone, feel free to reach out if you want to talk about outbound, cold calling, sales stuff in general, or if I can help you.